So, without further ado, our first speakers are Alana Newhouse and Ryan Jacob. Alana is the president of FAST, and Ryan is the chairperson of the board of directors of FAST. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves and talk to you about their why. But I'm really excited for you to hear the vision and the mission behind what we do and why we do it. Alana and Ryan.
Good morning, everyone. You good on the right?
Oh, great.
Great. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of FAST, and we're going to walk you through how we got to today. FAST was started in 2008 by a group of people who had what was at the time a pretty revolutionary idea. They thought, if we understand what causes Angelman syndrome, we actually know where it originates. Why can't we fix it? But rather than sit on the sidelines of the research and development game, as a lot of other patient advocacy organizations at the time were doing, they decided to band together so they could be an active player in the process. They adopted a business model that allowed FAST to assess the landscape of potential research areas related to Angelman syndrome, to seed that landscape through generous grants, and if and when lightning struck, to shepherd those technologies safely to make AS a priority from the academic space into the pharmaceutical one. To make that all a reality, this group of parents, as volunteers, through pizza parties, raffles, barbecues, and they raised enough funds to get FAST through its absolutely incredible first era.
So as Alana mentioned, there's kind of an arc that many of these organizations go through. And FAST, I think, was, in its early days, just more successful in going after the community fundraising and starting down the path of funding research. And during that time, we funded 88 grants for $50 million in total value. And that led to 15 FAST-funded programs that are moving forward today. And we, through the process of evaluating the science, coming to know the investigators, getting closer to the labs and the work that's being done around the world and around the country, we developed I think a very good view of where some of these opportunities for clinical trials and for advancing science would come from. This all culminated in making some great decisions around GTX-102 that you all are familiar with, the creation of genetics, which was a huge departure for an organization of our kind, and ultimately its sale to Ultragenics, which set up a new future for us and a new ability to think about how we professionalize and how we potentially grow FAST to become even more effective. And so we started to organize ourselves and think through, how do we move from being a completely kind of parent volunteer-led organization to a true foundation that can actually accelerate science and that can move us in the direction of hopefully commercializing more of these great opportunities and great technologies. And we said early on we needed to think through our fundamental model. And we developed a concept of domains. Domains are the critical things that we have to do. They are the areas in which, if we innovate properly, the right results will happen. And they also become a guideline for how we think about organizing ourselves, which you'll hear Alana talk about a little bit more. How we organize our staff, how we organize our work, and how we think about whether or not we're making progress. And so we looked at it really in the rubric that you see here. We think about science. What we're calling science here is really preclinical science. We want to be the leading contributor to discovery stage science around the world. We want to make sure that we're understanding what innovation is out there, how that can complement either existing patents that we're a part of, or technology that others may have, or how that might lead to a new breakthrough, which is what we're looking for. But we realize that the point of patent creates a huge shift in what our work should be and what the opportunities are and the risks are. And as I've said previously, we recognize that there's a high level of just risk associated with going from a patent to actually ending up getting through the clinic and getting into bodies. And so we realized we needed to become world-class, or hope to become world-class, at the second leg of the stool, if you will, the commercialization part of this. And that's really what you see here. So this means the process of going from a patent when we think we have something that could potentially go into the clinic, that could help our families, could help our children, and the process by which we can move as fast as possible in the most effective and safe way possible to end up developing something into an approved IND and eventually into a trial and taking it further and further.
And so the second two domains, which are development and engagement, really exist to scaffold the first two. You heard recently that Ryan just mentioned that we've already put $50 million into the space of AS. We have multiple clinical trials going, so you might naturally ask, aren't we at the finish line? And the answer is not anywhere close, in part because FAST's mission is to make sure that there are treatments for people living with Angelman syndrome at every age and every genotype. And part of doing that means that we actually have to protect and shepherd those technologies through all the way through their process. To do that will require a lot of money. And when I started to understand the scope of that challenge, I started to dream about what kind of strategy we could create and who we could hire for it. And I'm sure those of you in the community have heard this news, but I really want to point out that sitting right there in the room is Michelle Golembuski, who is our first Chief Development Officer. She comes to us from the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research, and she is an incredible partner already for us in developing the vision that we have for how we are going to seed the resources to fulfill our dream. And then the last domain is engagement. Yeah.
We love you already.
Yeah. You can't go back. Sorry. The last domain is engagement. And what we mean by engagement is how we communicate our message to the various cohorts that are our invested communities. Those cohorts begin first and foremost with families and caregivers. They're the most important cohort to us. Then there are the researchers. There's our partners in the pharmaceutical industry. There's geneticists, therapists. All of these people, we want them to understand our mission. I want to point out, I don't know where she's sitting, Megan Edberg, who runs all of our communications channels. Those of you who don't know Megan, please introduce yourself. But another leg of engagement, and one a lot of us may not think about very much, is what falls under the term advocacy. It's very, very, very important for us to get the message of our work to federal and state officials as well as regulatory agencies. And in that, we have lassoed the incredible help of Ryan Fisher, our Chief Operating Officer. For those of you who don't know, Ryan worked for Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy for 20 years. He built an incredible advocacy organization for them that engaged all of those levels of work. And he is in the process of building one for us too. He's been working hand in hand with Amanda Moore at the Angelman Syndrome Foundation. We already had our first advocacy day last year. We hope you'll all join us for this year's. And it's just been an absolute pleasure to see all of that work getting built. So those are our domains, and maybe now we can give you a little window into the larger group of people that make up FAST.
So I would like to quickly introduce our board. And if you're a board member, it'd be great if you could stand for just a few seconds. So I wanted to highlight the board for a moment because I think FAST came from a place where it was an all-parent board, and the board was doing everything from mailers to fundraising to trying to do operations, and there was little distinction between how our directors thought about the development of our organization, how we set strategic priorities, how we thought about allocation, and the day-to-day operations, and to really operate at scale across these domains, all four of them concurrently, and to do that really well, we realized that we needed dedicated operating teams that could go into each one of these areas and execute really effectively. So the way I want you to think about the board role is it's an oversight role. We're replicating a structure that exists in most leading foundations in the world. We're adapting it for Rare. But our board is focusing on setting the priorities on the overall strategy, making sure that we're being great fiduciaries of the donations that come to FAST and funding sources that come to FAST, but also making sure that our management team is moving the ball forward, if you will, as fast as possible. And when you create a system like this, and you're going to see this across the weekend, many things can happen much more quickly than they would have with a smaller group of folks that are trying to both be a director and operate and be a parent, and get to school on time, and so that process has allowed us to accelerate.
And so now it's my great pleasure to ask the staff who's in the room to please stand up. I'd love for you to look around and introduce yourselves to these people. It's an incredible team. And as Ryan explained, one of the benefits of the way that boards and staff work together when they split the work is that the board has a bird's eye view. And the board can do strategic vision work that you kind of can't do if you're very close to the ground. But you have to be close to the ground to actually get anything done. So what we do is we divide and conquer. The board allows us to have big vision, big goals. They set out the path for us and the destination, and then what the staff does is they manifest that in reality. So it is basically the way that we operationalize all of the parts of our mission. And increasingly at FAST, as you can see, we're organized by domain. Every domain is a department. Every department has a lead. All of the domains have their own goals, metrics, and tracking for all of our work at every level. And all of that is reported back to the board and eventually reported back to the community.
So I think it's important to say, what's the point of all this and why are we sharing all this with you? The point of all of this is really that what we want you to understand is that we believe FAST is going through its next really important evolution. We think that allows us to move towards what we call a cure, a tapestry of therapeutics that will ultimately get us full rescue for every phenotype. And we think that this process is proven in other areas and will work extremely effectively here. I also want to just take a moment and speak to everyone here that is newly diagnosed. I remember getting the diagnosis. It was one of the most challenging, painful moments of my life. I remember going through the fear and the pain and deciding that I had to do something. And FAST today is doing something in an incredible way. And you'll see that across the weekend, but I want you to know, and I want all the parents that are newly diagnosed to know, that I find hope through progress, that we all find hope through progress. FAST is making immense progress in every domain, and we are going to get through this, and we are going to cure this rare disease.
Allison likes to say, hope is hope, but science is reality. And that's what we're here for. And with that, we want to turn the day over to Allison Brent.